My name's Alan Litchfield, and I'm joining the call from New Zealand. I work as a senior lecturer at a university, and I'm director of the Surface and Cloud Computing Research Lab. And in our lab, we study and we investigate new technologies, emergent technologies. As an example, before this call, I was actually looking at the first experimentation of a network of a quantum network. My work is almost entirely with postgraduate and PhD students. And of course, in that kind of position, one is also a member of all sorts of professional bodies, Association of Computing Machinery, IEEE, on a number of working groups with the International Standards Organization, ISO, in which we develop new standards for technologies. So I've also served 2 terms as the president for the Association for Information Systems, special interest group on philosophy and information systems. And I did my PhD in philosophy. And in particular, what I'm interested at the moment in is this question of the relationship. This is something which it's been a thing which has teased my mind for many, many years, is the relationship between humans and the technology that they have created. And amongst the various expressions that we have of the human and the things that we recognize as being human, one of the very first things that we recognize as being human is its ability to make stuff that it can use. Yeah? The tools, the technology, the techne. Yeah? And if we think about this question, the human as a weaver of part to part and a connector of possibilities, we also need to consider that humans, by their nature, have a collective sense about them. And if we look at the way that technology has evolved over time, I mean, much of human technology has been related to communal resource sharing, accumulation of things that they need to survive, which have triggered changes in environmental, social development, and so on. And more latterly, communication in the sense that we are able to communicate through distance, as we are now, to see each other as we are now. And that all of these things are reflective of natures of our mind, that they are reflective of components that exist in our mind, that we build these things because this is what our mind is capable of perceiving. And so much of my research in recent years has been around this kind of thinking. I'm working with a number of students at the moment on developing technologies and solutions to problems around inequality, achieving fairness, having systems that are able to better replicate the activity of the human brain and mind. Not so that we can replace the human brain or mind, but so that we can better understand it. and what it's capable of, but also to help us. I think that often we talk about being rational. That the human is a rational being. This is one of the things that one of the English philosophers, Ryle, said. It distinguishes us from other beings, other creatures, is that we have this rational mind. But what my research has led me to is that actually largely we're not. And in fact, one of the things that makes us human is that we have these other faculties of emotion, which is not rational. Belief is not rational. How we get there might look rational. We try to codify things as being rational, and so we have logic and reason. And yet we tend to do things that are not rational. And so far the technologies that we've developed have been framed around rational conceptions of the mind. And the question for me is, well, what would that look like if we had technology that was built around a more sentimented, emotional context? One that was built around a cultural identity, one that was built around societal belief patterns, say, for example, from an indigenous perspective, rather than a purely Western perspective. And so these are some of the research projects that I have underway.
Beautiful. So we are already weaving part to part from ancient Greek and Logos in the Bible to teaching thinking and critical thinking skills to 10-year-olds and describing their brain and the mind through their metaphors, to quantum computing networks, but not the kind of computing networks that designed to replace us humans, but perhaps add and augment and enhance our understandings of ourselves. So who is ready to come next and add from your vantage point and experience? How do you experience and what comes alive for you when you hear the phrase, the human as a weaver of part to part and a connector of possibilities? Please.
Well, hello, my name's Robin Charlton, and I live in London in England. And I think what really inspires me is the place where I live. I'm very fortunate to live in this near this great capital and history. And ever since I've been a young boy, I've always wanted to go and explore it. And I found that I was always drawn to the open spaces, to places like Hyde Park, you may have heard of, or Regent's Park. And London does have some amazing parks. And then I fell in love with the art and science of gardening, and that's been a big passion of mine for many years. And when we talk about the human as a weaver, to see the plants and the flowers, the multitude, the expression of on the planet is a joy to behold for me. And I was thinking about this great question that we were proposing, and if we think about ourselves, and to live we have to breathe in to live, and that's taken in the air, and we have to drink the water, and we have to eat food, and that food comes from the planet, the place where we live. So I was thinking about these three elements, water, earth and air, and how it's just crucial for our continuance, these three elements. And the ancients had a way of watching those things dance. The one that's peculiar is the element of fire. You know, that's the one to get my head round, because when I'm with nature, I can see the earth and I can see the water, because they depend upon each other. We don't get any growth without water. And it's great to smell the flowers. But this mystery of what is the fire, where is that? There is the warmth of the sun. You know, I actually get very moved quite easily by these things, and I tend to write the odd poem. And I wrote one today. Maybe I can share that now. The idea that humans, you know, there's been a lot of us on this planet over the years, and we've done many things. And this one goes: Hermes Trismegistus, etched on tablets, so we would never forget. 32 ways to refine was a task he would not forget. So many great people have gone before. Their lives captured a moment, a treasure for sure. In music, art, poetry and song, they warm human hearts and help them along. They've made our lives better in so many ways. Charms, heals and warms the darkest of days. Because these lives were deeply moved, atmospheres are cleaner, opportunities improved. How can we ever feel alone when we listen to the beauty of Mozart's tone, or yearn with Homer for Penelope's love, or look through Emerson's eyes at the stars above? Those pioneers who went before left a richness for us to adore. So looking back at history, there's also a weave that comes from the past into our future, into the very lives we live today.
Yeah, I want to come in and say that I'm very happy to be with you. I am currently in Athens, but I was born in Cyprus. Yeah, that is a place where life has existed from 10,000 before Common Era. And yeah, one of the things I studied was history and archaeology and history of art. And one of the reasons was because the land I was born actually was a crucible of many, many, many civilizations and influences, you know, including the Egyptians, the Mycenaeans, the Persians, the Phoenicians, and then, you know, everyone passed from there. It was the Arabs, the French, the English, even the Crusaders, and Lionheart, and yeah, the Knights of the Templar, and the Lusignan and the Mamluks, and then of course the Ottomans, the Turks, and the English. So yeah, and everyone left a mark, and yet although now the country is divided, you know, it's like this land is a crucible of influences and civilizations, and all these civilizations, it's like they left a residue in the land, in the stratigraphy of the land. And I was wondering whether they have left also an influence in the collective unconscious, and maybe in me. And this was one of the reasons I was driven to study history, and a great lover of history, especially history of art, although I have been in the corporate world, so I worked for many years in a different field, but that was a line. And now I'm studying history of music and classical singing. So that's another approach of really finding the influences of the different frequencies. And what I want to say is that in my studies in history, I find that there has been very interesting synapses that caused, just to relate a bit of what Theodora said, and Elizabeth and Alan, and of course Robin. So, for instance, I was wondering who was the first person and what happened in his mind, the one that took the Phoenician alphabet and put the consonants with the vowels and create the Greek alphabet, from which the Latin alphabet was born, and then, many, many modern languages. Or, for instance, what happened to the brain or the mind of the first person that put movement in a statue? So before we had statues that were static, and then suddenly, interestingly, this happened in Greece as well, someone gave movement and turned somehow the bodies. And what happened in the mind of this person? And when I was young, my mother used to tell me, "You don't wear blue with black or blue with brown." And I said, "Says who?" What's this strange cliche or stereotype that blue doesn't go with brown? And maybe someone can make a trend out of it. So I was thinking also about, the ancient tragedies. And they were maybe the first time that the words, the language, was put together with music, together with staging. Also in the indigenous tribes this happened, in many forms of art in the indigenous tribes, in the storytelling there. And they would put together language, music, movement, the passion and the archetypes of the codes they wanted to transfer. And for instance, in Greece, they would go from sunset to sunrise, so about 10 to 11 hours for 3 days. They would work they would see a tetralogy, so that would be 3 tragedies and a satyr play. And the idea was that they would go through fear and compassion to come in the end in a process of emotional catharsis. So I was thinking about this weaving that basically was a process where they had to go through a process of interweaving with the actors, with the protagonists, the hypocrites, they were saying then, so the actors, and with the choir, because there was also solo and choir. And it was actually a religious process, because there was an altar in the middle of the orchestra. And I was thinking of all these processes and how the different aspects of the pathways of learning, because we know that we don't have only the academic learning, we also have emotional learning and moving kinesthetic learning and solitary learning, and there are many these different other pathways, auditory, visual, and how these are combined. And concerning art and stereotypes, I was thinking today as this conversation was brewing in me, I came to think about Van Gogh. And, I was thinking, what happened to this person? I mean, the first time I saw his paintings, I was mesmerized. I had to sit down because of what came through me. It was like a lightning, because of the passion of the way it was like he was fighting with paint, and the way he struck the brushes on the canvas. And I was thinking, what happened to this person? Because during his life, he managed to sell very few paintings. And strangely enough, now, you know, he's one of the Christie's sell about $82 million. His painting of Dr. Cachet, that was the doctor that treated him. And, you know, I was thinking, what happened to these people, his contemporaries, that they saw this art and they didn't feel what was passing through this man? What stopped them to feel that? And what stereotypes they had about art that did not allow them to feel the movement that interconnected his painting? What came through him? What was caused in me and in millions of other people today when they see this art? And I was wondering whether there are stereotypes like this that might be hindering us or preventing us from feeling the movement of what wants to pass through, of what is there, of what interconnects us.
So the last part you are sharing with us, Kyriaki, begins to sense into